The history of the Italian Mafia, or Cosa Nostra, is a dark tapestry of social need, political corruption, and brutal violence. It emerged on the margins of the state in Sicily, offering a parallel order, but exercising parasitic control over economic and political life. This narrative is inseparable from the history of Italy, reflecting its structural flaws and its struggle to establish an effective central authority. Give a like, subscribe, and share. Let's begin. To understand the persistence and resilience of the Mafia, it is essential to recognize the deep historical divide between northern and southern Italy. Before the unification of 1861, the south, especially Sicily, had been under an endless series of foreign dominations, from the Normans and Swabians to the Spanish and the Bourbons. This long history of subjugation created a deep-seated distrust of any central authority perceived as foreign or exploitative. Justice was seen as something that was bought or obtained through personal or family force, not as a right guaranteed by the state. This mentality of self-protection and contempt for state law, the seed of the future omerta, was fueled by the feudal system that dominated Sicily for centuries. The landowning barons, large landowners, exercised absolute power over their serfs and peasants with the consent of the dominant powers. When the feudal system nominally collapsed, the structures of power and control did not disappear. They were merely transformed, leaving a vacuum that the newly formed Italian state was unable to fill. To understand the birth of the Mafia, one must travel back to 19th century Sicily, a territory marked by centuries of foreign domination and characterized by a deeply feudal agrarian social structure. The unification of Italy in 1861, far from bringing stability and prosperity to the island, created a power vacuum. The collapse of the feudal system and the subsequent privatization of vast estates, latifundia, created the need for new intermediaries to manage the land and protect property, especially given the inability or disinterest of the newly formed Italian state to exercise its authority in rural areas. It was in this context of anarchy, distrust of the central government in the north, and a pressing need for protection in a volatile agrarian environment that the campieri, armed guards, and the gabellotti, property managers or tenants of large estates, emerged. The gabellotti were crucial. They rented large tracts of land to the absent barons and in turn subleased plots to the peasants. Their wealth and power were based not only on land management, but also on their ability to enforce contracts and protect crops and livestock. To do this, they hired the campieri, violent and loyal men who acted as a private militia. These men offered what was called protection, pizzo, mediated disputes, often in their favor, and guaranteed a brutally effective form of order in exchange for loyalty and money. This protection was, in essence, extortion, paying to avoid harm. Those who did not pay risked having their crops burned or their livestock stolen, and the state would not intervene. The term mafia, whose etymology is uncertain but often linked to the Sicilian word denoting bravado, arrogance, or need, began to be used by authorities and the press in the 1860s to describe these organized criminal gangs. The first official document that uses the term is a report by the prefect of Palermo, Filippo Antonio Gualterio, in 1865. The rise of the mafia was based on the concept of omerta, a code of silence and honor that prohibited collaboration with the state or the disclosure of crimes. This code, although it may initially have reflected peasant distrust of the authorities, was co-opted and applied with extreme violence by mafia groups to ensure their impunity. The omerta transformed silence into a moral and social obligation, and the breaking of this code, the fate of the pentito, was punished with death. The initial structure was flexible and often focused on a local boss that controlled a cosca, family or clan, in a specific territory, operating under an umbrella of enforced respect. The mafia, in this foundational stage, saw itself not as a purely criminal organization, but as a substitute power, an agency for social regulation and control of resources in a failed state. Power was exercised through control of water, land, citrus markets, and, fundamentally, through the systematic extortion of merchants and landowners. From its very beginnings, the mafia understood that violence was not sustainable in the long term without political cover. The alliance between the Coscia and the local political elite began almost immediately after unification. Sicilian politicians, often members of the aristocracy or the new agrarian bourgeoisie, needed votes to rise in the new parliamentary system. The mafiosi, with their control over rural populations, could deliver packages of votes in exchange for crucial favors, public contracts such as those for portworks or roads, judicial impunity for their members, and the appointment of their relatives to key positions in the public administration, police, civil registry, town halls. This agreement, known as the Sistema, cemented the mafia not only as a criminal force, but as a structural element within the Sicilian political and economic landscape. Over time, the Cosce became more sophisticated and their influence spread from the countryside to the cities, especially Palermo. Mafia members began to infiltrate local politics, offering votes in exchange for favors, public works contracts, and impunity for their members. During liberal Italy, from 1870 to 1922, the mafia became a silent but vital partner of the Sicilian political elite. This alliance between organized crime and political power, known as the Sistema, allowed the mobsters to operate with relative freedom, while the politicians ensured electoral control. The fascist period from 1922 to 1943 represented the first major frontal challenge of the state against the mafia. Benito Mussolini, perceiving the mafia as a rival to central authority and a stain on the image of fascist Italy, launched a brutal campaign. The dictator could not tolerate a power parallel to that of the state. Cesare Mori, known as the Iron Prefect, was sent to Sicily in 1925 with broad powers to eradicate the phenomenon. Mori's campaign was relentless. He employed draconian methods, including mass arrests, the siege of entire villages such as Ganghi, torture, public humiliation, and intimidation. Although the campaign was not based on due process, it managed to temporarily disrupt many kosher. This forced numerous mobsters, including key figures who would become famous in the United States such as Carlo Gambino and Joseph Bonanno, to flee primarily to New York. Mori's crackdown was effective in the short term, but it was profoundly unjust and authoritarian. He did not attack the socio-economic roots of the mafia, poverty, large landholdings, political corruption, but only its most visible manifestations. Furthermore, by arresting and convicting many innocent people alongside the guilty, he left a legacy of resentment and fear that the mafia would later exploit, falsely positioning itself as the defender of the people against an oppressive state. Mori's message was, "I am the state, Mussolini, not the mafia." But in the end, the mafia's defeat was temporary, and its leading figures regrouped abroad, gaining experience in a new and lucrative criminal environment. While the Sicilian mafia was being harassed by Mori, the Italian-American branch of organized crime, which had been developing since the end of the 19th century with the waves of immigration, was entering its golden age. Sicilian and southern Italian mafiosi, such as the Neapolitan Camorra and the Calabrian 'Ndrangheta, imported their organizational structures to cities like New York, Chicago, and New Orleans. The Prohibition period, from 1920 to 1933, in the United States was the catalyst that transformed these local extortion gangs into nationwide criminal empires. The prohibition of alcohol created a massive and highly profitable black market. Smuggling, illegal distillation, and distribution generated immense profits, providing the fledgling organizations with the capital and logistical structure necessary to grow. Figures like Al Capone, of Neapolitan descent in Chicago, or Charles Lucky Luciano, Sicilian in New York, consolidated their power through violence and business efficiency. The Castellamarese War, from 1930 to 1931, was a bloody conflict between the old traditional Sicilian bosses, the so-called Mustache Petes, led by Salvatore Maranzano, and the new wave of younger, more ambitious and Americanized mafiosi, led by Lucky Luciano. Luciano, who understood the need to operate like a modern business, orchestrated Maranzano's murder. Following this purge, Luciano established the Commission, a governing body that divided territories, prevented internal wars, and unified the 5 families of New York, Gambino, Genovese, Lucchese, Bonanno, and Colombo, as well as maintaining peace with families in other cities. This structure, more business-oriented, hierarchical, and less tied to the old Sicilian traditions of honor and agrarian extortion, guaranteed the survival and prosperity of the American mafia for decades, allowing it to diversify into gambling, union control, and loan sharking. The American mafia had become a national power. A crucial chapter in this global expansion and the subsequent reconfirmation of mafia power in Sicily was World War II. When the Allies invaded Sicily in 1943, Operation Husky, they actively sought the help of local mafiosi whom Mori had imprisoned or exiled, seeing them as an anti-fascist force, since fascism had repressed them, and with invaluable knowledge of the terrain and logistical networks. Notably, Lucky Luciano, then imprisoned in the US for pimping, allegedly negotiated his assistance, reportedly helping naval intelligence secure the ports of New York and facilitating contact in Sicily with the US military in exchange for a reduced sentence and deportation to Italy. This alliance was a long-term disaster for Sicily, as the Allies reinstated numerous mafiosi in positions of power as mayors and officials, the most notorious case being that of Vito Genovese, who served as an interpreter and was appointed mayor of Villalba by the Allies, giving them legitimacy, political power, and access to public administration that they would not have regained on their own. This was the second major reaffirmation of the mafia as a legitimate and necessary power in the eyes of an external force, marking the beginning of its period of greatest power and the reconstitution of its ties with politics, especially with the nascent Christian Democratic Party, which they saw as a bulwark against communism. The period following World War II and the creation of the Italian Republic, 1946, and the autonomy of Sicily was the golden age of the Sicilian Cosa Nostra. The mafia infiltrated deeply into the new dominant party. The Christian Democrats controlling reconstruction funds, public works tenders, and the administration of public services in Palermo and other cities. This became known as the looting of Palermo, an explosion of illegal construction, real estate speculation, and corruption that enriched the political class and mobsters at the expense of the city. The famous urban planner Vito Ciancimino, a Christian Democratic politician from Palermo with deep mafia ties, became the symbol of this era. The power of the mafia was radically transformed with its entry into the international heroin trade, abandoning the agrarian approach to become a multinational criminal enterprise. The transition began with the French connection using laboratories in Marseille, and later with the pizza connection in the United States, a network of pizzerias used to launder money and distribute drugs. Sicilian mafiosi such as Tommaso Buscetta and Gaetano Badalamenti played a crucial role in refining and distributing heroin on a large scale. This not only generated enormous wealth, allowing them to corrupt on a large scale and acquire legitimate businesses, but also changed the internal dynamics of the mafia. The rural and violent but poorer clans clashed with the urban clans, which were richer and politically connected. Tensions over control of drug trafficking profits and new opportunities for enrichment led to the two mafia wars, which were turning points. The First Mafia War, early 1960s, was an internal conflict that attracted public attention with the Circuli bombing in 1963, where 7 law enforcement officers were killed by a car bomb intended for a rival mafia boss. This act, which killed innocent people and state agents, provoked a brief though ineffective state response and the temporary detention of many mobsters. However, attention soon waned. The Second Mafia War, late 1970s and early 1980s, was, without a doubt, the most violent and transformative period in the history of the Cosa Nostra. Led by the Corleonesi, the Corleone City faction, with its ruthless leaders Salvatore Toto Riina and Bernardo Provenzano, this war was a systematic purge intended to take absolute control of the cupola, the commission, and the entire Sicilian territory. The Corleonesi brutally eliminated their internal rivals in Palermo and more traditional mafiosi, as well as anyone who stood in their way, including politicians, judges, prosecutors, and journalists. Emblematic assassinations such as that of General Carlo Alberto Dalla Chiesa, sent to fight the mafia in 1982, and that of Piersanti Mattarella, regional president of Sicily, brother of the future president of Italy, demonstrated Riina's intention to challenge the state head-on. The Second War consolidated Riina's control and transformed the Cosa Nostra in a more centralized, monolithic and brutal organization known as the Corleonesi Mafia. Give a like, subscribe, and share. The Corleonesi's excessive violence and terrorism provoked an unprecedented reaction from the Italian state. The turning point was the creation of an anti-mafia pool in Palermo. A unit of judges worked together to share information and avoid becoming easy targets for the mafia. This pool was initially led by Rocco Cinici, assassinated in 1983, and later by judges Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino. These judges understood that in order to combat the mafia, they had to understand its structure and its code. Their strategy was based on the use of the pentiti, repentant or cooperating with justice. High-ranking mobsters who decided to break the omerta in exchange for protection and sentence reductions. The most important of these was Tommaso Buscetta, a traditional Palermo boss who had gone into exile in Brazil and whose family was massacred by the Corleonesi. Buscetta decided to collaborate with Falcone in 1984, providing a detailed and credible map of the hierarchy of the Cosa Nostra and the existence of the cupola, commission. His revelations confirmed that the Mafia was not a collection of isolated gangs but a single hierarchical organization, allowing prosecutors to indict the entire leadership for the actions of all members. Buscetta's information formed the basis of the historic Maxi trial of Palermo, which was held in a high-security bunker built specifically for the trial between 1986 and 1987. The Maxi trial was a monumental event. It accused 475 mobsters and resulted in 342 convictions, with sentences totaling 2,665 years in prison. Delivering the most significant legal blow in the history of the Mafia, the Cosa Nostra reacted with its most powerful weapon, state terrorism. In 1992, when the Supreme Court, the Court of Cassation, confirmed the convictions of the Maxi trial, Toto Riina ordered the execution of the symbols of state resistance. In May of 1992, Judge Giovanni Falcone, his wife Francesca Morvillo, and 3 bodyguards were killed in the Capaci massacre. An attack with 500 kilograms of explosives on the highway near Palermo. 2 months later, in July of 1992, Judge Paolo Borsellino and 5 members of his security detail were killed in a car bomb attack in Via D'Amelio. In front of his mother's house in Palermo, these acts of terrorism not only shocked Italy and the world but paradoxically achieved the opposite of what Riina intended. Public outrage was massive and immediate. The state, humiliated and under unprecedented pressure, was finally forced to mobilize all its resources. Thousands of soldiers were sent to Sicily and tougher anti-mafia laws were imposed. The Mafia had crossed a red line, moving from criminality to open war against the state, and the state finally responded with all its force. The terror of 1992 led to a relentless hunt. Toto Riina was captured in January 1993, putting an end to his reign of terror. His successor, Bernardo Provenzano, known for his strategy of going underground and using violence only when strictly necessary, implemented a low-profile strategy. Known as the Mafia Peace or Silence, Provenzano was finally captured in 2006, after more than 40 years as a fugitive. The arrests of the main leaders, along with stricter laws such as Article 41 bis, which imposes a harsh prison regime on mobsters, isolating the leaders and cutting their ties with the outside world, and the growing cooperation of the Pentiti have decimated the power of the Cosa Nostra in Sicily. Today, the organization still exists, but it has largely returned to its origins of local extortion, pizzo, protection payment, struggling to maintain its influence in an environment where the state is much more present and the omerta has been deeply eroded. While Cosa Nostra is dealing with its decline, other Italian criminal organizations have grown into global powers, filling the void. The 'Ndrangheta, the Calabrian organization, is now the most powerful and richest criminal organization in Italy, and possibly in Europe. Originating in the poor mountains of Calabria, the toe of the Italian boot, its structure is based on strong blood ties, the locale or family clan, which makes it incredibly resistant to police infiltration and the threat of the Pentiti, since betraying a member implies betraying a blood relative. The 'Ndrangheta dominates cocaine trafficking in Europe, controlling up to 80% of the entry of this drug through ports such as Gioia Tauro. Its immense profits have allowed it to invest and launder money on a global scale. It has a presence in more than 40 countries, especially in Germany, Canada, and Australia, and has deeply infiltrated the legal economy in northern Italy and the rest of Europe through construction, restoration, and transport businesses. Another significant organization is the Camorra from Naples and the Campania region. Unlike the centralized Cosa Nostra and the family-based 'Ndrangheta, the Camorra is a more fragmented and anarchic network of constantly competing clans, the Fade. The Camorra focuses on controlling urban territory, local drug trafficking, extortion, and controlling illicit businesses such as disposal of toxic waste. The toxic waste cycle, a particularly devastating and polluting business in the region known as Land of Fires. Its fragmented and violent nature makes internal struggles frequent and territorial control more volatile, but its impact on daily life in Naples and its surroundings is suffocating. The Italian Mafia, in all its forms, has left a complex cultural and social legacy. On the one hand, its history is a dark stain, responsible for thousands of deaths and deep corruption that has undermined trust in institutions. It has imposed a massive economic and social cost on the regions it dominates. On the other hand, it has inspired countless works of art, literature, and film. Movies like The Godfather and series like The Sopranos and Gomorrah have mythologized, or in the case of the latter, demystified, the figure of the mafioso. Mythologizing creates an image of honor, family, and tradition that often obscures the ugly reality of extortion, drug trafficking, and violence against innocent people. Romantic narrative, which sometimes glorifies the boss as an honorable outlaw, has been an obstacle in the real fight against organized crime. The real fight against the mafia is not won with arrests and trials alone. It must be won by attacking the mafia mentality. This mentality, which sees the law as optional and the state as an enemy, or worse still, a corruptible partner, is the true legacy of centuries of oppression and of a state that historically has not been able to guarantee justice and opportunities. Organized crime thrives on educational failure, unemployment, and economic inequality, offering a fast track to power and wealth for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. A crucial part of the modern fight against the mafia has been the mobilization of civil society, especially in Sicily. Organizations such as Addio Pizzo, Goodbye to Extortion, formed by merchants and business owners who refuse to pay the pizzo, have shown that the omerta can break down when society unites. The confiscation of mafia assets and their reuse for social purposes, schools, agricultural cooperatives, community centers, has been a powerful tool to demonstrate that the state can wrest economic power from crime and return it to the community. The study of the mafia is a constant reminder that organized crime is not just a clandestine police force, but a socio-economic phenomenon that thrives on state failure, economic inequality, and political complicity. The fight against these organizations is a continuous struggle for legality, democracy, and the dignity of communities that have lived under the shadow of fear and extortion for more than 2 centuries. The history of the mafia is a chronicle of illicit power, a lesson on how violence becomes institutionalized, and an ode to the memory of those who paid the ultimate price for challenging the legends of crime. From judges to ordinary citizens, in the 21st century, mafia organizations have evolved significantly, going from being local extortion groups to key players in the global financial economy. The greatest power of the 'Ndrangheta and, to a lesser extent, of Cosa Nostra and the Camorra's strength lies in its sophisticated money laundering capabilities. They use tax havens, buy government bonds, invest in the real estate sector, and use online banking to move billions of euros, integrating their criminal profits into the legal economy. This infiltration into the legal economy is perhaps the greatest challenge for modern states. The mafia is no longer just a force of violence and extortion, but an economic force that distorts competition, corrupts markets, and undermines the financial health of entire nations. For example, in northern Italy, the 'Ndrangheta has used clean funds to participate in public works tenders, especially in infrastructure projects, winning contracts and using low-quality materials, or charging for services not performed, all while using violence only as a last resort. The fight against the mafia has gone from being a purely Italian problem to a matter of international security. Cooperation between law enforcement agencies, FBI, DEA, Europol, and the Italian police, Carabinieri, Guardia di Finanza, is now essential. Judicial agreements allow the extradition and trial of mobsters operating thousands of kilometers from Sicily or Calabria. The implementation of legislation that allows the seizure of assets on a transnational scale has become the most effective tool to attack the heart of organizations, their wealth. Another fundamental concept that has emerged from modern research is that of the third level, terzo livello. This term describes the gray area of complicity and collusion between mafia bosses, politics, the business elite, and corrupt secret services. Falcone and Borsellino's investigation suggested that the mafia could not have wielded such absolute power without the active assistance of figures in the highest spheres of the state. The trials and revelations following the 1,992 bombings have revealed the existence of secret negotiations between state representatives and mafia bosses, the state-mafia negotiation, in the early 1990s, a desperate attempt by the state to stop mafia terrorism by offering certain concessions. Although controversial, this concept underlines that the mafia is in essence a system of power and corruption, not just a collection of criminals. Ultimately, the mafia endures in the cultural imagination. While films like The Godfather and Goodfellas have idealized the American gangster, Italian cultural production, especially from the 2000s onwards, series such as Romanzo Criminale and Gomorrah, has adopted a much cruder and more demystifying approach. These works focus on the cruelty, banality, and misery inherent in life within organized crime, offering a view closer to the reality reported by prosecutors and pentiti investigators. The history of the Italian mafia is not a relic of the past. It is a living organism that adapts to political, social, and technological changes. It is a continuous lesson on the fragility of the law, the ease with which power can be corrupted, and the perennial need for democratic vigilance to defend legality and human dignity. The shadow of the Cosa Nostra and the power of the 'Ndrangheta reminds us that the battle against organized crime is a constant challenge to the sovereignty of the rule of law. Give a like, subscribe, and share. See you next time.